This is what I call airing some things out. It it's sort of interwoven with all the different libraries of information, if you will, that I have presented through all the videos that I share what it is I experienced at the time I become aware of it and why I put it up on a video to begin with and why that is, right? But I suppose because it's pretty hard to qualify everything that you've experienced if you're going to try and break it down into bits and bytes of visual information that you experience by what you experience through others that communicate with us on a visible light spectrum, right? Holographically, mathematically, which are represented by codes, which can be broken down as algorithms, if you will, or geometric patterns of vibration and frequencies. Okay, so that's pretty straight up stuff. But I've mentioned this before because even when I was growing up and I realized that I was surrounded by, because what's happening is just, DNA is an antenna, right? So you know what your core vibration is, which is your identity. So you acknowledge, as I did at a very early age when I had this up and running really fast. And that's another measurement. When you think about the terrain that you find yourself in or the energetic environment that you find yourself in. So I knew at 4 years of age I was in a fallen system, which makes it a spiritual battlefield. So that means that you acknowledge that you're different, extremely different from thousands, if not millions of other people that you become aware of. And the reason for it is quite simple, because you realize the way that I don't stereotype things, which means I put everything into one single basket, because that's not, it makes it easier to measure it differently. In other words, I don't measure things on an individual unit basis, but you can meet somebody and then you can scan their energy, or if you will, the consciousness that is imprinted into the operating system, and then you can measure their core identity, okay? From, if you will, eternity and everything else that came after eternity, if you will, and the way that that's measured energetically. Okay, so in other words, if you're an eternal being, then you know everything that isn't. That makes it an easy measurement. Okay, which means now you're measuring loss of fractals. That's how you know you're in a fallen spiritual system. So I don't, as a rule, use alphanumerical formatting. Like, for instance, you take the Pleiades star system, Arcturus, Sirian, Alcyone. Give it whatever name and label that you want, okay? Whether it's a star system, a planet, a galaxy, a supercluster, okay? What we're measuring is energy, which is consciousness, okay? If you will, of what you're experiencing being what I call being plugged in to a network, okay? Because you realize that DNA as like a network means you're in a communication system. So you realize operating systems like computer terminals that are all connected with each other, say a planetary motherboard or a planetary network. So then you have different networks that are operated on that are different from each other because they speak different languages, right? In sound and light, if you will. Okay, in other words, if you have one species that comes from another galaxy somewhere out in the boondocks, then whatever language that they're speaking can be mathematically defined and experienced in energetic terms. What does it feel like to be in the presence of that energy? So at the end of the day, it's not really about letters and numbers as codes, mathematical codes or instruction sets that represent the operating system, including the entire planetary operating system, because then you can scale it up between every single planetary operating system, between every planet and every galaxy that exists. If you want to perceive it in software terms or network terms, like building a tree network. Same way you plant a seed and a tree grows, so a tree is a network because it's got branches. And from those branches, as photosynthesis bands, becomes what? A mirror. So I'm not going to go into the water distribution tables of mirrors and trees and plants and planets because that's obviously huge, but actually it's really a simple discussion. But because of all the communications that I get in the windows of the friends that I have, of what they're choosing of their own consciousness to now experience, particularly when it comes to AI, chatbots, chat GBT, and all the rest of this, it's like, you know, when I was a small child in elementary school, the first thing that came to my mind is that I'm surrounded by all these people that are making choices or decisions in their life, right? That you acknowledge within your own self you would never make. And the reasons is quite simple, because you realize the future. They don't have a future. And all you have to do is measure the health of the planet. So now you begin to realize why you're here. So you already know at 4 years of age you're in a fallen system. That means it's a dying planet. Okay? That's what it means. Okay? So when you have a planetary system that's been hijacked from what it was originally intended, then the first thing I would ask is, well, who was providing the security for this planet? Okay? So I've mentioned this, if I'm going to measure, and this is where, there's another qualifier, which means don't take it personal, because it's not personal. It's called a measurement. It's a measurement of an observation, because we experience what we're experiencing through what we observe, as above, so below. So I'm using this terminal here, down here, in order to experience what we're doing up there, to see how successful we are up there to the missions we're performing in here in these. Okay? Like, in other words, you come in as an observer. Okay? So as you're observing the success, we're uploading data. Okay? Sort of like you're in a safe zone. Like you're protected, right? So you're in here, and I've known this since I was a child, as an observer. Okay? To see the level of success that we're having as a result of what happened to a fallen spiritual system by all the other beings that are on board to solve the problem of a fractal virus, which is no different than a viral code that's inside of a computer and it's corrupting the original codes, which means the original sound magician, if you will, the first grand creator. And the first grand creator is going to use its consciousness in which it becomes aware of what it's creating. And the first creation that came out of that will be what it experiences in its own mirror, whether it's a he or a she, for example. So I'm not going to use the gender side of this, but just pure light. Hottest fire is now aware of what it's aware of, and it's aware of what love is. And it's on fire because of how much energy is represented by that intensity that it has in realizing it's a creative mind, which means it's creatively on fire. So now it's realizing how powerful it is. So I'm sort of thinking in the third person or second person here, because I know what it's like to experience that experience, because I have those experiences throughout my entire life, which is one of the reasons why, for as bad as people can measure the things that we experience that are perverted, or if you will, what I consider to be a dying planet, a fallen system. So how would you know a fallen system from a rising system or a spiritual system that is thriving? And that's easy to measure, because all you have to do is measure the behavior, which means the use of people's energy to experience what they experience at any one given moment of now time, when there isn't any time. So that's why, from my perspective, I measure experiences as events. It's not about time. It's about what I'm experiencing at the moment that I'm experiencing, which is the completion of a circuit. So if I'm experiencing what love is, then I'm experiencing what I am. If I'm experiencing something that's less than what that is, then I'm experiencing a signal that I'm experiencing through my antenna that is less than what love is. Because you realize you're connected to everything when you're an eternal being, which is eternal light, which is a living spirit that is in that light, which is seeking to purify its spirit as a result of coming in to what I call a contamination zone, which is a viral zone. So that means spiritual immunity means that you have the ability to burn off anything that is less than eternity. Otherwise, you're going to be consumed by the fact that you're in a fallen zone. So this is a fallen system, which simply means this is a spirit that has fallen in battle. Okay? Into what? A lower domain. A lower realm. The underworld. 1D, 2D. So when you scale this up to some of the things that Patty Broussard mentioned, for example, how they migrated as a result of being able to reverse engineer technology to go up into further higher densities, right? And then you get into the whole notion of how everybody is experiencing what they're experiencing by virtue of the connections that we have with everyone else that is experiencing what they're experiencing. Then you begin to realize the numerical, quantitative, and qualitative assessment of what we have the capability to be able to measure, not just on a planetary scale, but a galactic scale, a density scale, and a universal template scale, wherever we go, because an eternal spirit, which is eternal fire, which is an eternal light that is seeking to purify itself as a result of the spirit that is with a soul, if you will, to experience a fallen realm is not a normal realm. And it's not normal in the sense when you realize that love is law, because that's what you experience. Because when you're experiencing the law of least effort, then you're realizing that it's no effort to gift away love energy. So you're experiencing in us what we experience, which is what love is. So we're able to measure anything that isn't what love is. So now that becomes a scale measurement. So it's not about particular names, about what star system you're in, what your name is in an alphanumeric format. It's the energy that we experience. And it makes it simple to keep the personal side out of it, even though we have personal relationships between different beings that are seeded races. Okay? So, for example, one particular seeded race could have come out of a particular star system, but they don't live there anymore because they're in another galaxy, because the nature of the way that relationships work by the ones that we choose to have with other beings that have been seeded or live in other galaxies, right? So, in other words, you could have been born in one galaxy, but you haven't been there for 1 billion years, because there's so many other places that you've chosen to experience by virtue of the relations that we have with everything that is possible to experience through the love that we are, which is a spirit that is in that light, integrated with a soul. Right? So this is one of the reasons why I don't get into the numbers game, what I call a numbers game, or the numbers racket, of trying to isolate, if you will, a particular star system as a being that, say, comes or lives in that star system, as, how would I put this? Well, when you think of a fallen spiritual system and you're in a spiritual war, I don't get into what's known as the victim-victimizer, which is the blame game, because I experienced that myself. Because I had just like an experience that I shared with the lady that I met down the road here in La Jolla. Came in on a bus on a plane flight with her girlfriend who came out of Texas. She was a beautiful spirit to be with, and the nature of her essence. And then she mentioned to me one day before she was going to leave and go on, when she was witnessing to me or observing me crying. And that's particularly when I'm down at La Jolla, because the energy's down there so beautiful to experience, but it depends on when you're there and who else might be there. But on this particular day, I was crying like a child. And so she asked me what was wrong, and I told her that I hadn't done enough, that I felt like I had not done enough, because at the point of time when I realized as a child I was in a fallen spiritual system, that I was trying to get mama up. So I felt like I failed her. It would be analogous to, for example, you're a parent and you're an eternal being. You're experiencing eternal unconditional love through your own heart. okay, and you realize that you've come into, say, a planet where your child is, okay, a powerful spirit whose energy is running the warp drive in a planet ship because her energy is so powerful. But when you come in there, you realize that she's fallen in energy into a lower realm as a result of having been under attack, right? So therefore, you're going to do everything you possibly can as a spirit integrated with a soul in order to heal her. So she's experiencing in you the higher speed, like a warp drive, not a warp drive, but a hyperspeed drive to get, it's much like, come on, baby, let's get it up. Let's get it up. So essentially what you're wanting to do is increase the speed of her drive motor to go vertical so that her consciousness is now higher, right? Which she's experiencing more fire through us that allows her to raise her state of consciousness, the level of her energy, so the Schumann resonance is going northbound or vertical. So in other words, the vibrational energy that she's now experiencing within this planet to fill the ley lines, which means now that everybody's sort of connected through the bioplasma, which is all the arteries and the veins that exist within the planet, which would mean the oceans, all the lakes, all the rivers, all the creeks, everywhere that water flows, which would be the carbon and the water cycles, is now experiencing greater purity by virtue of experiencing more fire. Now that she's experiencing more fire that's come in here, which is going to raise the speed of that vibration to get the Schumann up, and that means that all the arteries that are connected to all the arteries that are in my body, then you can imagine all the arteries and living spirit that are with all the other bodies that have a soul and a spirit. Now become like energized. Whoa, now I'm waking up, which means now they're experiencing more fire, which is burning off the goo codes they were held captive to before as a result of the AI, which is finite light. It's not eternal light because it's not eternal fire. So now when you begin to add up and quantify and make a qualitative assessment across a planetary terrain, you're measuring the differences over time, space, how successful we are being able to do that, because you realize that so many of the other beings that you're connected to, as I knew as a child in the early 1950s, were basically bots. They don't experience eternal fire. They don't experience the purity of their own spirit and their own heart, or they're giving away energy. So that it's very much like the way they describe a non-player character, but I don't make any negative connotation because when you are what love is and that's what you're experiencing, it means even if I could walk up to an android that looks like a human, that android's going to experience what I'm experiencing by its ability to translate the vibration and the frequency of the operator that's got a soul and a spirit. So now if it can translate that, much like in the movie The Terminator, where you see now all the data is being provided. This is a human, in other words, it's able to scan. And the reason it can know what it is that you are is because it can scan the data of your operating system. And if the information is available to it, because the information is stored in memory, then the AI can say, hey, this is a human, number 886.8, whatever version it might happen to be, because that particular version of that operating system is within its memory storage. Now it knows who it is. This is one of Gaia's creations. Or this is one of Eve's creation. Who was the original creator? So there'd have to be some way to scan the data to know that, unless it's just a copy. Right? And then now we get into original creations and then copies. Okay, so you already know that you can make a copy of something, right? When you're a child and you decide out of your own creative imagination, you're on fire because you have so much love in your heart, and you decide that you want to take out some colored pencils or whether you used to call them finger colors or whatever sort of artistic creative expression that you have of your own free will to do that, and you want to use whatever means you have available to you to simulate it, because that's exactly what you're doing, because you're not using your consciousness to directly manipulate the environment, where all of a sudden the next thing you know is you're in a forest that you just imagined being in and now you're there. Which means you could manifest that much information, visual mathematical information, which means, as an example, let's say you see what's out here. So you can see the sunlight and you can see all the little plants, everything that's on the floor, all the microorganisms, all the little spiders, all the little bugs that are crawling around, everything that's flying around from the smallest to the largest, the trees or the sky. Now imagine that your imagination is experiencing a completely different terrain or landscape, like a canvas, right, in your mirror. And the next thing you know is I walk outside, instead of experiencing what I just took a picture of as moving pictures using a video camera to do it on this Android, that all of a sudden, instead of being on the big island of Hawaii, now I'm in some other world that I just manifested that I'm in, and there isn't anybody else there but me. Because it was my consciousness, the amount of energy that I have available to me, which is the purest of love, which is the purest of light, in which to do that. Now I realize I'm in that world that I just manifested. Wow. That kind of power. Now, if you tried to how do I put this, quantify in the way that they do it in computer science with using digital virtual world simulation art forms, right, which is not real art, but now we get into how we're going to define the terms, right, because that came up with something that was in my window through one of my dear friends. So they use the art of what we call the war of deception, which is, again, war of words, and how that sort of works. In other words, if I came up to you and I said, hey, look what I just created using Adobe Photoshop, and that's a digital format, right? And I spit it out of a 3D printer or even a 4D printer and said, okay, look what I just created, okay? And I was using software in which to do that. Now, the question is this real to you or not real to you? Okay, so now we got to define what real is. But what's real to one person might be defined and experienced differently than somehow somebody else might describe it using the language that they use to describe it. And one of the reasons why the English language is one of the poorest languages of alphanumerical formatting of energy to communicate, because what's real to one person may not be real to another person, depending on how they perceive and they define, held in memory, what those letters as numbers mean as energy based on all their experiences. So if I walked up and said, well, here's a picture of something, or if you walked up to a tree, is that tree real to you? Okay, so how do you define what's real to me? Well, I can tell you how I define what's real to me, and that's living energy. Is there a living spirit with a soul connected to that? Which means, are they experiencing what love is? So love is what's real. So when I was a child, I knew that was the standard. That's one metric, which is one law, and that's it. That's how I define the worlds that I'm in, because that's going to tell me whether it's a fallen system or a rising system. So if you know that love is the law because you are what love is, then anything that's less than what that is isn't real to me. It's fake. It's illusion. That's how I do it. And the reason for knowing that and not ever budging on that is for obvious reasons. Because once you lose the perception of knowing the vibration from which you came, it essentially means if you're experiencing an eternal love vibration because you're on fire and that's your identity, so you know your true self. You know your true soul self, and living spirit is what love is. Then you know that you are what's real. That makes it easy to measure something that isn't real. Okay? Meaning, are they experiencing what love is, which is living light in them? So we have the capacity, because we are real light, which is what love is that goes on forever, which is real, and something that isn't real. Real in the sense that love is what's real. So therefore, when you're in a fallen system, you begin to realize how the use of technology, or the inception of technology and the acceleration of units of consciousness that come together, in which they realize how they can utilize and develop technology and the ways in which they do that in order to do what it is that we experience through them, we experience in us. They become a violation of love as the law. So now you can begin to add up in what we call energy debts, because if consciousness is energy, which it is, because that's what it's aware of, because without energy, you wouldn't be aware of what you are in energy. Now you begin to understand how the use of technology, no matter where you come from, no matter where you were born, no matter what star system you come from, there's accountability for the use of your energy. Now, they use the word called karma, right? But the obvious in this is that as other units of consciousness with souls integrated with spirit, who represent what the law is, who live in honor with that law, if you're truly an honorable, lawful state of consciousness with a soul and a spirit, then that means that what you are in energy will be represented by what you do in energy, that is the law. So if you're not experiencing what the law is, then you're outside the law. It means you're not experiencing the law no matter what you do with your energy. So if you're doing something that doesn't represent what love is, as a result of what you use your energy for, that others experience as a result of what you use your energy for, that it's against love as the law, then no matter where you come from, no matter what star system you want to attach a name or label to that, then there's going to be eventually accountability for what you used your energy for and which you did that. So this is where the technology side that I measured before, by their ability to use the technologies, is to escape that accountability because they're aware of what it is that they've done to other units of energy that represent consciousness that is against the law of one. So they're always buying time through the use of technology so they don't have to account for what they've done with their energy to others. So in other words, the universe of energy that is conscious and aware of itself, that began with what love is naturally going to balance itself out or remove that which does not represent what the highest law is. It will naturally do that. And that's why it's easy when I know that to share that, because it's not personal. It's the way that the law works. It's the way that the energy naturally will work that way, is to remove that which doesn't represent what the law is. And you have, and we have, the right to be able to do that. When you are what love is and stand with the highest law, and then something that isn't what the law is, which is what love is, does something to us, okay, then I'm not going to be held responsible for what they do to us. Their energy is going to be held responsible for what they do to us as a result of what will happen to them, because they're living in a time matrix, if you will, in which they're living on borrowed time. So what that means is that's one of the reasons why they're always experiencing time, is because they're not experiencing the purest of energy and spirit that is on fire outside time, that has freed their spirit and freed their energy to be able to create that which what love creates. So now you begin to see the difference between what a real creator is and what a digital virtual world creator is. One is real and one is finite, which means these are not real creations. These are temporary. These are copies. These are a virtual world. Now, this obviously doesn't mean that you can't enjoy being able to experience something as in a digital format, but at the same time, it's also an acknowledgement that it's temporary, because how long do you want to hold it in memory? Now we're into memory storage. So I've had the great blessing throughout my life of having to be able to experience, it's almost impossible to enumerate it, but even since I was 4 years of age, when I think about everything that I've experienced, it wasn't what love is. And then I experienced everything that I was experiencing that is what love is, by virtue of what that experience was like to experience. And if I was to enumerate that or quantify that in a qualitative way, then what I would say is that even since I was 4 years of age, and I make a quantitative and qualitative assessment of all the experience that I've had since I came out of my mother's portal, I have had far more beautiful experiences that were just spectacular, not only from what I learned by that through self-discovery in my own mirror, by the relationships we have with everything else that is, But it's the beauty of being what love is to be able to say something like that, which means I was able to experience heaven being in a fallen system because of the perception that we have of the universe that is real to us, upon which we experience it that way in vibration. So that's why I spend so much time in nature, is because I'm trying to heal everything that is in nature, because everything that is in nature is living energy and living spirit with Mother Earth. So she was my biggest concern, obviously, because she fell, because this is her domain, or realm, if you will, or classroom, if you will, or the way that Patty described it once, a hospital ship. Or in another way, because I, grew up as a small child, wanted to go into the caretaking business, right? Because you're like an energy medic. You're like a first responder in the cosmos. I'm the first one out, the first engine out, the first rescue guy out. Boy, as soon as I get a call and I realize, hey, something bad happened, you're the first one to be there, because you want to restore anywhere that you become aware of a loss of energy or a loss of light, which means they're no longer experiencing what love is, because that soul suffered a loss of a fragment or a fractal as a result of trauma that it's experiencing as a result of something else that is present in its environment. You want to be right there to be able to heal it back so that it remembers what love is. It goes on forever, gifting you love. So they're experiencing the real stuff, the real McCoy, because they're feeling the higher vibrational energy. Wow. Yeah, because everything is energy. So they're experiencing the highest vibration of healing energy. So we want to bring in healing energy here. Get her up, get her up, get her up. And when you get her up, then you begin to realize that others, through all the operating systems that are here, will begin to be restored, which is like pulling fragments in. It's like reclaiming your power, pulling in all your dolls. What is that called? Origami, where you see, known as the Russian dolls. In other words, they're all connected to each other, right? So you can pull them all out in a row and go, wow, all my energy was fueling all these different beings. Wow, how many machines was I running, or how many operating systems was I running that I was aware of using my energy? Which means, well, part of me was over here on this ship, part of me was over here, part of me was over here, part of me was over here. So imagine how that works when you know that you're an eternal being. So I mentioned that before because I had an experience that being on the island, I realized that you want to be a tree for a day. I think I'll do standing duty over here to be a big-ass mirror on the Big Island. Or if you will, in some other place like in New Mexico or Massachusetts or New Hampshire or up in Canada somewhere. How about China? You want to go be a tree for a day? So you realize, because I experienced the same eternal love energy that flows through me is the same eternal light, which is real light, which is living light and living spirit with a soul, is being experienced through everything else wherever the light is. So that means the same energy that flows through me, which is eternity, is the same energy that is flowing through everything else that I am wherever the light is. Real light, not finite light, but living light that is eternal light, which is eternal fire, which is eternal unconditional love. So everything that is living in nature will experience the difference between what it was experiencing before and what it is experiencing now. When you put your bare feet on the rock and put your hands on a tree and allow that love to just flow without thinking about it, out of your soul, through your heart, right directly into that tree. And now that will flow through the mycelium network of all those roots, which are all the conductors, which are like all the pathways in which energy can now travel. Then the tree becomes a conduit. You're a conduit in which eternal energy is flowing through our heart. Now it's flowing through the tree. Now it's going to flow through the tree, through everything else that tree is connected to, which means everything on this rock. So when you got 5 magnets, you can see how that would work, as why it's the largest shield volcano, and how that's connected to the language of DNA across the entire planetary terrain, right? Working with all the elements. Right? All the elementals, all the elements that are in the physical body. So imagine all the software operating systems here that represent elementals, all the elements, right? So that, in other words, the intention of my energy is for everything that is here within this planet to experience the one, the law of one. So we represent the law of one, which is a single candle, right? Which is known as a hierogamic union, which means the male and the female have joined forever to become the one. So there's no separation. And that allows us to be able to do the work that we do while we're here. And as I used to say, it is what it is, mama. Have a great day. Bye now. What a beautiful sunny day.